My name is Thomas, and I'm 30 years old. I currently work as an employee at an IT company. I live alone in Tokyo. My hobby is reading. Especially, reading books at a cafe is my happiest time. I have loved reading since I was a child. Books teach me a lot of knowledge. They show me worlds I've never seen. Books are a guide to success in life. When I was young, smartphones were already popular, but my parents didn't let me have one, so I worked part-time in high school to buy my own. Many of my peers had phones since middle school, and they enjoyed watching trending videos together. Of course, I was envious. But I loved reading books just as much, and my parents would buy me any book I wanted, so I didn't grow up resentful. I read books of any genre: novels, essays, history, and self-help books. Thanks to that, even though I didn't study much, I always had excellent grades in school. Probably because reading improved my comprehension skills, I understood the questions on any test. However, just reading Japanese books didn't help me with English. After exhausting my interest in Japanese books, I reached out to English books. I started with simple children's picture books. At that time, I wasn't interested in novels, but I could read simpler books. In Japan, many schools are now focusing on education speaking in English, but during my school days, speaking and listening were still weak points for most students. However, once I got my phone in high school and watched many English YouTube videos, my knowledge grew rapidly. I enjoyed it. And my English became one of the best in my class. Some YouTube videos detailed the English books I was interested in, which made me like English even more. Although I was an introvert who loved reading, my excellent grades led to a few girls confessing their feelings to me during school. Even though I spent breaks reading at my desk, apparently, some found that appealing. But if my grades were poor, no one would have paid any attention to me. Still, having read many books and having a mature mindset, I couldn't bring myself to like my classmates just because they lived nearby and attended the same school, no matter how attractive they were. I thought it would be boring to be with someone who couldn't see things from my perspective. Then, in high school, I encountered a book that changed my life. I was 17 at the time. 13 years have passed since then. Now at 30, I have been working at an IT company for about 4 years. Honestly, I haven't been getting along well with my colleagues here. But that's partly because I hid my educational background and most of my identity when I joined, hoping to do better after failing at my first job. I intended to act incompetent. I joined this company with a high school graduate resume. My previous job was at a trading company. I quit after 2 years. But apparently, I got this job because my previous trading company experience was impressive. When I joined, Kenneth, my supervisor, said, "We didn't really need a high school grad here. You're not even a new graduate. But because of your previous job at the trading company, we had no choice but to hire you." That's what HR said. Be careful, we value academic credentials here. It's President Kimball's policy. Hearing that, I regretted hiding my education, but I also thought, if they had such a bad attitude, they shouldn't have hired me. It was unpleasant. As Kenneth said, new hires like me were discriminated against based on our academic backgrounds. Whether we were capable or not didn't matter. The company also had a seniority system, and people who couldn't do their jobs were in charge, pushing their work onto quick workers like me. "Hey, high school grad." They stopped calling me by my name. Other high school graduates, technical school graduates, and those from lower-ranked colleges were ridiculed and eventually stopped coming to work. There's a reason I've lasted 4 years here. I wanted to change Japan's ridiculous society, which values academic background and seniority. At work, being able to work quickly and accurately is the most important thing. Nothing else matters to the company or the customers. Even in medical schools, there's a significant difference in college rankings. But when you become a doctor, patients can't choose you based on whether you graduated from the University of Tokyo. And just because someone from the University of Tokyo is highly educated doesn't necessarily mean they'll do meticulous work or prioritize patient care. Japanese companies are still lagging behind the world. This is partly due to how we've been educated. But if we continue this way, the quality of Japanese work will keep declining. I thought things couldn't stay like this. I want to change Japanese companies and make Japan a country that continues to thrive as a developed nation. With such a passionate desire, I've endured being ridiculed by my superiors for 4 years in this company. Of course, being mocked daily can sometimes make a person feel negative. There were many times I thought about quitting because I couldn't change the company. However, some colleagues admired me despite the mockery from my bosses. Their support gave me the strength to keep going. I was saved many times by them. One of them was a graduate of a prestigious college, but they admired my quick and efficient work, and how I always left on time. Bosses often told me, "Don't leave before everyone else just because you're a high school grad." But I finished my work and the extra tasks dumped on me, and still left on time. They didn't like my attitude. Although I have ambitions to change the company, this is how Japan is. Living here means following Japanese rules. That realization disappointed me many times. I worked very fast. I arrived 15 minutes early, but finished my work faster than anyone else. Japan has countless unnecessary checks. Even when I was told to do pointless tasks, I didn't do them. Because they were pointless. If there's a clear reason for double checking, I don't skip it. But I thought, as in my previous job, there were too many unnecessary tasks. Without redundant checks, tasks are completed much faster. My quick work annoyed my bosses, who said things like, "You're cutting corners, aren't you? It's strange that you finish early. Or you're not doing the checks, are you?" This is why high school grads. Listen, regardless of what you think, this is the company's rule. If you can't follow the rules, we'll have to fire you. They probably saw my attitude as rebellious. In my previous job, I argued back and ruined relationships, so now I only respond when absolutely necessary. But I haven't made any mistakes. That's the point. It's too late after a mistake happens. I was shouted at. But I still thought there were too many unnecessary tasks, and there was no guarantee that doing them would prevent all mistakes. There were also excessive formalities in communication and documentation. Detail is important, but some female employees would change text colors and decorate notes just for sharing information. It only needs to be conveyed without errors. Unnecessary decorations aren't needed. I was appalled by middle-aged bosses who admired such unnecessary efforts. Some employees spend work time meticulously arranging office supplies. I thought, no wonder they end up working overtime. My means of stress relief remained reading. There are more and more places in Tokyo where cafes are combined with bookstores, and even hotels where you can read your favorite books. Bookstores are clean and comfortable. There is air conditioning in summer. It feels heavenly. Time flies while reading. I enjoyed buying my favorite books and reading them at home. Since reading is a solitary activity, I didn't get a girlfriend or make many friends. Reading is a solo pursuit. Still, thanks to reading, my life was fulfilling. And on Monday, the days of being ridiculed at work would begin again. I believed I was the most capable worker in the company. However, with my high school diploma and cocky attitude, I thought I would never get promoted here. As the end of the year approached, the company's annual year-end party was coming up. I was feeling gloomy. I didn't have any close friends at work, and drinking with people I didn't like wasn't enjoyable. I would rather go home early and read a new book. But skipping the year-end party wasn't really an option unless there was a very good reason. And both Kenneth and my manager, Kyle, had reminded me beforehand. At the year-end party, your job as a high school grad is to entertain Mr. Kimball. Mr. Kimball's mood depends on you. I wondered why it had to be me, but I understood the reason at the party. Mr. Kimball was a graduate of a famous college, and that was his status symbol. That's why our company was such an academic meritocracy. And the reason why Mr. Kimball's mood depended on me. He needed someone to look down on and mock. Most of the high school and technical school graduates had already left the company. Because of the intense pressure from the bosses, I was a valuable target to entertain Mr. Kimball. At the party, I was seated next to Mr. Kimball. Thomas, you're lucky. You're sitting next to Mr. Kimball. This is something a high school grad like you will never experience again. Kyle, sitting across from me, said. I disliked Kyle, who was kissing up to Mr. Kimball, probably aiming to be the next president. Mr. Kimball, this guy's a high school grad. He's always so difficult to deal with. Kyle and my other bosses mocked me in front of Mr. Kimball. Well, it can't be helped. Those without an education are too dumb to follow orders. It's hard for me to understand. Since I graduated from a famous college. Of course, I was very irritated, but I endured it, thinking this irritation would end today. Your name is Thomas, right? You should listen to the smart people. I'd like to see how smart you are. Mr. Kimball scanned the room. Hey, Thomas, go hit on that blonde woman over there in English. If you succeed, you can leave the party and take her home. A stupid game. Mr. Kimball knew I wouldn't be able to do it and wanted to embarrass me. Making everyone laugh at my expense to liven up the party was one option. I hesitated for a moment. Go on, Kyle next to me pushed me forward. I approached the blonde woman. Hello, how are you? Hi, how are you? As I spoke to her, I could hear the murmurs from Mr. Kimball and the others. Thomas is giving it a try. But even a middle schooler can say hello, how are you? Indeed. I continued the conversation. My name is Kenneth. What is your name? My name is Mally. Where are you from? I'm from the US, but I've been living in Tokyo for 3 years. Oh, really? Well, are you unattached? Currently, yes. Can you drink beer together at a bar? Sure. I didn't expect my attempt to pick her up to go so smoothly, but it worked out easily. Mr. Kimball and the others probably didn't understand our conversation. After all, my English pronunciation is almost native. Mr. Kimball was left speechless. Kyle, with a red face, said angrily, "You embarrassed Mr. Kimball just because you can speak English. Since I successfully hit on her in English, I'm going to take the beautiful lady out." Excuse me. I could hear the bosses telling me to read the room, but I ignored them and left the venue with the lady. She was with a group of 3, but they were all just about to leave. We went into a stylish bar nearby. I can speak Japanese, Mally said to me. Sorry for suddenly dragging you to a bar. I explained the details of the situation. So it's like a penalty game? Are you not interested in me? Mally said. No, it's not like that. I am interested in you. I thought you were beautiful from the moment I saw you. I want to know more about you. Japanese people don't hit on others much, so I was surprised. Mally said, but as we talked, we became closer. Having lived in the US, we had a lot to discuss about the differences between Japanese and American culture. We would be off for the New Year's holidays right after the year-end party. I often invited Mally out for drinks during the holidays. Then the day to return to work after the New Year's break came. I felt gloomy. It was my first day back at work after embarrassing Mr. Kimball at the year-end party. But I went to work anyway. You don't have a desk anymore, Kyle said, looking at me. I knew it. I had been fired. I felt devastated, wondering what I had worked so hard for over the past 4 years, and cried loudly when I got home. It was a shock to be fired so easily. I had colleagues who admired me, but they would continue working at that company. I couldn't move on right away and called the HR department. A woman answered. This is Thomas. I was fired today without a valid reason, and I'm not satisfied with that. I said, and the woman replied coldly, You're Thomas, right? You graduated from Harvard, didn't you? We've been informed of your false credentials. That's right, I went to Harvard after graduating from high school. It wasn't exactly false credentials, I had a reason for not listing it on my resume. I had a bad experience at my previous job because of it. It's not really false credentials, I just didn't list one of my qualifications, and I have a reason for that. But that's still a lie, isn't it? Her response was very cold. She was probably instructed to respond that way. Realizing that further conversation would be pointless, I hung up. So even Mr. Kimball, who likes highly educated people, hates me because I embarrassed him. I muttered to myself. Oh, damn, what should I do now? I couldn't stop talking to myself. At that moment, I thought of calling Mally. When I told her I got fired, she invited me to dinner. Thomas, you got fired? Yeah. Why? There are many strict rules in Japanese companies. When I said that, Mally seemed to understand. I'm also tired of Japan. There was a brief silence, then, Thomas, you can speak English, right? I have a friend who works in trade. I'll introduce you. Being fluent in English, the idea of working in trade was appealing. Please, I'd appreciate an introduction. I told Mally. A few days later, I met Mally's American friend, Mr. Smith, who worked in trade in Japan, at a cafe. We hit it off, and he first asked why I could speak English so well. When I told him I went to Harvard after high school, he was very surprised. I got into Harvard thanks to books. Since I loved books as a child, studying wasn't painful for me. The same went for English, I learned it naturally because I loved reading. The desire to attend Harvard also came from a book. I read one book in high school. I forgot the title, but it said if you want to change your life, go to Harvard. Although it was a high achievement, and I was anxious about living in the US, when I told my mother I wanted to go to Harvard, she surprisingly supported me. Thomas, you've always been a good kid and easy to raise. Thank you so much. I'll support you as much as I can, my mother said. Of course, my school teacher said, we want to help, but we've never had a student go to Harvard, so we don't know how to assist you. But my mother had meetings with my homeroom teacher, Mr. Thompson, and asked Mr. Sanders to prepare the necessary documents, and finally, through our efforts, I got accepted. When I got in, even Mr. Thompson shed tears of joy. The hardest part was convincing my father. He was against it. He questioned the point of spending so much money on an education without a clear goal. My reason for wanting to go to Harvard, written in a book, didn't seem convincing to him. But showing good grades on mock exams and my teamwork with my mother moved him. Seeing us pursue our dreams, he eventually felt compelled to support us by the summer of my senior year, according to my mother. Thanks to our efforts, I achieved my dream. Honestly, attending Harvard wasn't my long-standing dream. But encountering that book gave me a dream, and with the support of those around me, it came true. The desire to achieve something usually arises from what one feels capable of doing. Thus began my life in the US. Harvard is in Boston, quite an urban area. At Harvard, there were not only Americans but also people from overseas like me, which made the environment very enjoyable. Although I studied English, I initially lacked confidence in my pronunciation and felt nervous meeting people. But everyone was kind. I thought I had to be the one to initiate conversations to fit in, but my classmates were quite proactive in reaching out, and as days went by, I grew closer to everyone. I became particularly close with a student from Saudi Arabia. His different religion made our friendship very interesting. It felt like my world was expanding. We even traveled to New York together. New York was very stimulating and dazzling to me at the time. We watched a Broadway musical. To save money, I always ate burgers when we went out. I also experienced love. It was with an American. We dated in college but broke up before graduation. The reason was that I spent too much time on books and couldn't prioritize our relationship. At that time, I decided that if I ever fell in love again, it would be with someone more independent. Living in the US was challenging due to cultural differences, but it was very fulfilling. I often visited the company run by the father of an American friend I had gotten close to. He also wanted to go into business in the future, so he frequently visited his father's company. During those visits, I learned a bit about American companies. Everyone left work on time. They didn't wait for their bosses after finishing their work and enjoyed their time after work. They minimized unnecessary tasks to the extreme. I graduated from Harvard a year later than usual. Graduating from Harvard normally is indeed challenging. At graduation, I had mixed feelings about staying in the US. But my strong desire to change Japan led me to return and seek employment in a Japanese company. With a Harvard degree, job hunting wasn't difficult. Since I could use English, I thought a trading company would be a good fit and joined one. There, I learned that the values I had cultivated abroad didn't apply in Japan. From the beginning, my Harvard degree made people distance themselves from me. When I heard the rumors about me, it was like, Thomas seems out of place because he lived abroad. I know. It feels like he doesn't want to associate with Japanese people. Thomas? Oh, the Harvard grad? He's a bit odd. It feels like he looks down on Japan. They saw me as an outsider who looked down on Japan. Japan is a society where you must conform to others. If you stand out, you get criticized. I wasn't looking down on Japan, I just had a passionate desire to improve Japanese companies. There were also rumors about me leaving before my bosses. Of course, I would say my greetings when leaving, but I didn't ask, is there any other work left? I left because my work was done. That's natural. Why should I help slow bosses with their work? That's what I thought. Admittedly, I lacked teamwork. But that didn't warrant bad-mouthing. I thought I stood out because of my Harvard degree. If being discriminated against or standing out because of my education was a problem, it was better not to mention it. That's what I thought. People avoided interacting with me, and I missed out on important work communications, which affected my job performance. Eventually, my mental health suffered, and I quit the trading company. For a year, I didn't work. Or rather, I couldn't. I didn't want to do anything and was lethargic. Comparing my current state to my memories of American life made it painful. I think seeing lively people in American companies and then working in Japanese companies with the intent to change them but then facing a reality far from my ideal caused the gap between my expectations and reality, which eventually strained my mental health. What did I do? Of course, I read books. At that time, I was hooked on IT, so I read many books on that subject. A year later, I joined an IT company. It was the company I got fired from recently. On my resume, I didn't list my Harvard degree, only my high school diploma. After telling my story, Mr. Smith said, "What a waste. Having a Harvard degree but not utilizing your potential is really a waste." Mr. Smith said. But in Japan, my way of thinking isn't accepted. When I said that, Mr. Smith replied, "I understand." Having someone who understood me was a relief. Mr. Smith then said, "Why don't you work at my company? There are many Japanese employees, but the work environment is more like America." I am the president. I saw hope. My goal was to change the way people work in Japan, but after getting fired, I realized it wasn't feasible in the current climate. As the saying goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Japan has its own way of doing things. If I wanted to work my way, I'd have to start my own company. Mr. Smith's offer seemed like the best option for me at the moment. "Yes, I'd love to work with you," I replied. "Then, there's training involved, so can you start tomorrow?" "Yes, of course," I answered eagerly. Thus, a new chapter of my life began the next day. I first toured the company, and given my Harvard degree in native-level English, I started with handling phone calls and emails. I could tell I was thriving in this company. It reaffirmed that people have environments where they do and don't fit. While it's possible to endure and strive in a challenging environment, finding a place that suits you without pushing your limits is important. As I got used to the work, I was entrusted with tasks like shipping, delivery management, and transportation arrangements. The company had a clear distinction between work and personal time, and my private life became even more fulfilling. My personal life no longer revolved solely around reading. Yes, I started dating Mally. It seemed I was better suited for relationships with foreigners. Japanese women had often criticized me for not being considerate enough. Spending time with Mally was a joy, and my reading time decreased. This surprised me. I never imagined meeting someone who could take precedence over reading, which was my life. I was deeply moved by this. We visited theme parks, and since Mally was a foreigner, she loved temples and shrines, and we enjoyed collecting temple seals together. We also visited Kyoto, which Mally had always wanted to see. I liked Kyoto too, but visiting with Mally brought many new discoveries. If I visited alone, I might have overlooked some buildings and signs. Everyday life and environments became exponentially more enjoyable with Mally. Mally often joked, "Thomas, you got fired because you met me." Taken out of context, I might have been unlucky at that time. But meeting Mally led me to a job I truly wanted and someone who became more important than reading. Now, I'm very happy. Mr. Smith also valued my work in native-level English, treating me well as his subordinate. He often took me out for drinks after work. After getting fired from that previous company, my life turned around. No matter how much I wanted to change that company and aimed for a promotion, I would always be ridiculed as a high school grad and never get promoted there. 2 years after starting to date Mally, she told me she had something important to discuss. I live with Mally now. We had cancelled our previous leases and rented a new place with 2 rooms. Thomas, I want to go back to the US. Mally said. At first, I wasn't sure if this meant she wanted to break up or if she wanted me to go with her. I froze, unsure of how to respond. If you'd like, Thomas, why don't we live together in the US? I thought for a moment and said, of course, I'd love to, but things are going well with Mr. Smith's job. And it's hard for Japanese people to get an American visa. With a tourist visa, I can only stay for 3 months. Then let's get married. That way, there won't be any visa issues. I was surprised by the sudden mention of marriage. Thomas, do you not want to get married? It's not that I don't want to. I do, but I always thought it would be someday. I'm just surprised it's now. So you do want to? Then let's do it. And so, we decided to move to the US about 6 months later. Even though marriage would help with the visa, it's still challenging to get an American visa, so I planned to attend a school for the first year. When I told Mr. Smith about it, he said, I'm staying in Japan, so you can always come back if you want. Mr. Smith, aren't you going back to the US? When I asked, he said, I have a Japanese wife. That was news to me. Wow, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me before? When I asked, Mr. Smith laughed and said, I thought I had mentioned it. But he understood my decision to leave the job in 6 months. In this aspect too, Japanese companies make it hard to leave, so I thought that Mr. Smith was truly an American. Mr. Smith's American attitude respected personal circumstances. So, I planned to visit my parents with Mally. It would be the first time bringing Mally to my parents' house. And I was nervous about how they'd react to our international marriage and our plan to move to the US. My mother had been supportive when I went to Harvard, so I thought she'd understand, but I was worried about my father. We had a hotel lunch booked for our first meeting. Moreover, Mally wanted to wear a kimono, so we rented one, and she got dressed and had her hair and makeup done. Mally, with her blonde hair and blue eyes, was already stunning, and the kimono made her even more radiant. She looked beautiful. When we arrived at the hotel, my parents were already there. Seeing Mally, my mother immediately said, "Oh, she's so beautiful," which made Mally happy and eased my tension a bit. My father's face remained expressionless, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. We're getting married and will live in California, where her family is, in 6 months, I said. My mother, looking happy, said, "As long as you are happy, that's all that matters." My father just said, Dad, do you approve? I confirmed. Yeah, you're lucky to have such a beautiful bride, he said. My mother added, both your father and I don't oppose it. Once you make up your mind, you always go through with it, don't you? Hearing this, I was touched by my parents' greatness. Mally, not understanding the indirect Japanese conversation, whispered, "Are your parents okay with it?" I smiled and said, "Yes, they're both okay with it." We enjoyed the kaiseki meal. Though Mally had been living in Japan, it was her first time trying kaiseki cuisine, and she was delighted. She was excitedly asking, "What's this?" while eating. After lunch, we went to my parents' house. There's not much, but please relax, my mother said, preparing green tea and Japanese sweets for us. We spent a few enjoyable days and then returned to our place. We are now preparing to move to the US. Initially, we'll live at Mally's family home for a while. My plans have changed significantly. I wanted to change Japanese companies. But now, I want to live in the US. Some might think I lack direction, but as I read my books, I realized that life doesn't always go according to plan. That's just how it is.